All righty. Welcome, everybody, to the Moab City Council meeting on June 24th, 2025 at 6:02 p.m. I call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Pat Tripp's going to get the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we have our public comment section. It's limited to 3 minutes. If you'd like to speak, I need you to fill out a form. If you haven't filled out a form, you can do that on your way out. But who would like to speak? Mary, come on up.
Thank you. I'm Mary McGann. I'm here as a citizen, although I am a member of the Grand County Commission. And I came here to thank you and hopefully ask you to unanimously support the letter for the financial help for the pickleball court. It will help us out, but I'm also excited about it because I like the idea anytime we are able to work together as a team, and we've done it successfully in the past. I mean, it was the team of the city and the county that got the money that's moved the process of getting the tailings removed. And it was the city and the county that worked on CIB loans for the Aquatic Recreation Center. And we've had joint meetings where we've signed resolutions. We wrote a letter of support for the landscaping for your downtown. And I just hope that this can continue. And I appreciate your help very much.
Thank you, Mary.
And Mary didn't mention, but she does play pickleball. She's pretty avid. She's pretty big in pickleball, just so you know. All right. Next, we have 2 presentations. We're going to start with rim to rim restoration, and then Michael will do a presentation on our crosswalk standards. So we'll start with Didar.
All right. Hi, Mayor and council members. Thank you for having us this evening. So today I have team members from Rim to Rim, Bryce Roger and Sophia Fisher with me. They prepared a presentation for you. They're going to talk about Community Wildfire Defense Grant. So this grant is, they got awarded for $5.2 million to remove fire fuel corridor of the Mill Creek, Pack Creek, as well as the wetland. So we are partnership with Rim to Rim with other partnerships. They're going to talk about the metrics they use, how they decide to prioritize the sites, use the fund most efficient. And they're going to talk about a breakdown of the fund, how they been spending, what is the future plan for the 5 years. This is the 5-year grant. And then the works they have done so far and what is the plan for the future. Also, they're going to mention about the outreach for flood preparedness they do for the city. That's another topic, so that will be so likely we're going to mention about that. Yeah, so I will ask Sophia and Bryce to come here and start a presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Didar.
Thanks, Didar. Hi, counselors.
Hello.
Michael, you ladies. Very nice to see you guys. So, Summer, can I share my screen?
You should jump in, yeah.
Great.
Awesome. And as Bryce is getting that set up, I'll just introduce us. I'm Sophia Fisher. I'm the Fire and Flood Outreach Specialist for Rim to Rim Restoration. This is my coworker, Bryce Rogers, who is the Project Coordinator and Restoration Specialist, I believe, for Rim to Rim Restoration. And we're here to present on the Community Wildfire Defense Grant, so it should be pretty quick.
Assuming it lets me share, give me just 1 second.
Yeah. We also have packets that don't let me forget to distribute after we're done with the presentation to some of the examples of outreach materials we've been producing. Well, as you do that, I can honestly start jumping in.
Okay, sure. That's great.
I'll start off with just some of the nuts and bolts of the Community Wildfire Defense Grant. So it is a $5.2 million award, as Didar mentioned, spread out over 5 years. The grant period began last year, so it'll run through 2029. And the nexus, really the purpose of the grant, is to do fire fuels mitigation along Mill and Pack Creeks in the Matheson wetlands in the Moab Valley. The project is, oh great, here we go. And you can move to the next slide. Awesome, thank you. And the project is being overall helmed by Room to Room Restoration as well as Moab Valley Fire Department. We have Clark Mon here in the audience from Moab Valley Fire as well. But there are also a lot of other local partners, City of Moab, Grand County, Utah Division of Forestry Fire State Lands, Science Moab, Moab Solutions, Nature Conservancy, the list kind of goes on. So it's very much like a partnership oriented project. It's a federal award from the U.S. Forest Service, but was sub-awarded through the state. And there's also a strong outreach and education component to the grant that we'll get into in a minute, but I will hand it off to Bryce to talk a little bit about project prioritization.
So the idea with the grant is essentially that we are able to assess both public and private land for mitigation. In order to do that in a transparent and hopefully fair way, we've set our qualitative measures to have more quantitative output. So that's essentially what I'm showing you here. Notice the weird donut diagram. That's actually indicating the weight with which we assess each property dependent on what we see. So that 50% that includes hazards, that's our fuel loading, what kind of fuels are present, fine fuels, ladder fuels, as well as taking into account the fact that a lot of these fuels contribute to our flood risks within the creek corridors and the wetlands as well. Additionally, we try to assess proximity. That includes vital infrastructure, location on the creek, and whether or not this is near or adjacent to fire breaks. Obviously, prioritizing areas where we can ideally connect fire breaks, but even more emphasizing areas where we can create new ones. From there, we also look at our population demographics and how this affects the floodplain overall. So additionally, we recognize there are a lot of especially private parcels in the county and the city that the owners of those parcels might not be able to deal with the complexity of the removal problem. So increased slopes, a density, basically having a thicket of something that would be impossible for you to get through with just a chainsaw, and also environmental concerns like springs or anything else that could impact all of your hazards downstream as well. The last metric we use is repetition. As we all know, trees like to grow back, especially Russian olive. If you guys have ever been near a Russian olive, you know it fights back rather quickly. So we do try to prioritize areas that we know are going to need repeated maintenance as we go through this, since the life of the grant is 5 years. So there in the middle of the screen, you basically see a breakdown of the output for that. So anything that gives us a score of 50 to 0, we consider low priority. Low priority is anything from giving landowners materials or plans to help mitigate their problems themselves, especially if it's rather sparse, into maybe trying to use 1 or 2 days of work with Moab Valley Fire or a youth corps that we contract with. Medium and high priority properties tend to get bumped up as much as we can. Those tend to include larger acreages, and we rely heavily on Moab Valley Fire, Forestry Fire, and state lands, and like I said, for our youth corps crews. Anything that registers at 90 or above out of the priority matrix automatically tips us into what we call a multi-agency hitch. So this is something like if you guys were looking at the Pack Creek corridor right next to the 191 bridge during Jeep Safari, if you were looking very closely, you would have seen about 15 chainsaw wielders down there trying to get in and relieve the pressure that all of the Russian olive and elm have been putting on that particular stretch of creek. And that was 3 different crews working together: Forestry Fire State Lands, a UCC, which is Utah Conservation Corps, as well as Moab Valley Fire. So if you notice the really boring looking spreadsheet to the side, the main thing that I do want you to see is that's about the number of properties that we have. And there's a metric right there at the very bottom of the screen that shows that between work we have done and work assessed, which the spreadsheet reflects, we are at about 365 acres of land. So, and that's everything from completed to flagged as high priority to we still need to go out and do a site assessment.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk a little bit about the revegetation component of the grant. It is primarily a fire fuels removal grant, but there is some language and some funding in there to revegetate these areas with native species, which has a benefit both for mitigating wildfire risk for the long term, but also mitigating the impacts of floods that come down the creek corridors. The photos, I won't go too into depth, but they're kind of meant to show the different ways that flash floods can impact the creek corridors if they do versus don't have native species there to kind of hold the banks in place and prevent the incision that you're seeing on the upper right. We are also going to seek other funding sources to help bolster this work, and we expect the revegetation to really take off a couple years down the line too, once we get a lot of the fire fuels removal done. And this also dovetails really well with the outreach and education component of the grant, which I can also jump into next. So talking a little bit about outreach and education, that's a big part of my role at Rim to Rim, and it's a big part of the grant. Really, the purpose of the community outreach focus is to help make sure that this mitigation work and this work to make Moab safer from wildfires can continue well after the actual grant ends. So the way that we're focusing on doing that is increasing, wildfire fluency and awareness in the community generally, but then also making sure that landowners and residents kind of have the tools and the expertise and the knowledge they need to feel comfortable either doing their own mitigation or maintaining those properties after mitigation's done. As Bryce mentioned, invasive species really like to resprout with kind of a vengeance after you remove them once. So it's going to be really critical that there's a cyclical and kind of repetitive aspect to all of this work. The way we've been doing that is a couple different facets. We've been creating physical handouts and mailers like the one on the bottom left, developing a really strong web presence on social media, doing some tabling at existing events outside of the grocery stores. And then we're also kind of couching this public awareness campaign within the moniker Fire Break, break being an acronym you can see on the screen, mainly so we don't have to say CWDG kind of over and over again to people. And yeah, so we're really excited to continue doing that work.
So when we're talking about the funding for this, as we said, it's $5.2 million over 5 years. Essentially, we would like to give you a feel for where City of Moab fits into this. So if you see on the left-hand side of the screen, that is the overall breakdown, and notice that the vast majority of it goes to our contractual partners. In this case, that's working with wetland crews, Science Moab, which gets a small sliver, Moab Solutions, that's helping us deal with our unhoused population in these creek corridors, as well as Moab Valley Fire, who's doing a lion's share of most of our fuel removal work, Grand County Weed Department that is helping to support us, and of course, City of Moab, either through any sort of outreach we've done with office staff or relying heavily on parks and streets crews for everything from information to maybe even pitching in on some of our properties. And that's the actual monetary breakdown, just in case anybody was curious. So at this point, over the 5-year grant, it's allocated over $650,000. That's basically just to assist with the maintenance, like we said before. And if you notice there on the right, oh, you want to talk about the photo, please.
Oh yeah,
your photo.
That's the,
Yes.
we thought this photo really exemplified the importance of the City of Moab as a partner in this really important work. That is from that hitch that Bryce had talked about earlier. That is a DNR employee felling, I think it's an elm tree, along Pack Creek, downstream of 191. That work, and you can see there's a flagger actually from the King Creek Boulevard reconstruction project in the background. That project happened kind of as that as the reconstruction project was wrapping up, and there were a lot of moving pieces. The multi-use path was being paved, so it required a lot of really close coordination and collaboration with city staff to make sure we could get the equipment in there that we needed without disrupting the reconstruction project in any way. And it was a great success. It was. I was trying to remember oh, okay. So I got it now. As Sophia mentioned before, we are basically focusing heavily on our outreach into the community, but we are also using that to build stronger ties professionally within all of our partnerships. There has been a creek stewardship working group that has been in place for just under 2 years now, and that is where we pull together a lot of our partners to try to get either information on the creek corridor and issues that we are seeing with that, or trying to work collaboratively on trying to solve any of those issues as well. And that has a lot of the same partners as the CWDG or the Fire Break campaign, but with some other hangers on as well. So we get a lot of people from City of Moab that show up to that and really help us with just some information, if nothing else. And it helps us to keep this sort of project working.
So additionally, a big part of this is actually using LiDAR to try to figure out these areas where we might not see the connectivity on the ground. LiDAR is also being used in this aspect to try to identify some of our more erosional concerns, especially along private properties. There was a new LiDAR data set that was flown in March of this year. I don't know if anybody was aware of that, but it replicated the 2018 data set exactly. And the idea is that we can do a one-to-one comparison on that to see not only how the vegetation has changed in the area, but also topographically. We're also using that information to try to help to inform any sort of flood or risk mitigations we have going forward. That's with county and city at this point. Additionally, we are trying to help that is trying to help us to inform the outreach we are currently doing with City of Moab.
Yeah, and on that outreach front, through the contract with the city, I've been producing some mailers and handouts and social media in tandem with various city departments to help people prepare for floods, get ready for monsoon season. And we're also hoping to help inform the community a bit about the role that the city plays in recovering from floods, because city staff are, on the ground doing a ton of work. It'd be great to, help people understand the process better and how hard city staff work on that front.
Okay, so this is just a before and after of the work that we've done so far this spring. So if you see on the top left, that is a view from the 191 bridge looking down Pat Creek, and you can see the Bighorn Lodge there on the right. And then a month later, that is the view of it now. So not only have they removed a significant amount of the invasive species and a lot of the deadfall, frankly, there was a ton of dead trees in there.
And there's a cool surprising benefit too that we're going to talk about.
And I'm just going to switch to that right now. So this is basically turning around and looking at what we were just looking back at the bridge. So essentially getting in there, we were able to figure out that one half of that box culvert is essentially sedimented in. So if you look on the lower right there, you see a deer for scale standing on top of
There's like 3 feet
sedimentation.
And this is a UDOT bridge?
This is a UDOT bridge, and we reached out to UDOT as soon as we found this and said, hey, not only did we find this, but we also removed all the trees for you. And so UDOT has bumped this up on their priority list and we'll be in touch. Yeah.
So we'll be talking to UDOT about that. I have not seen this perspective of that.
No. Nobody gets down there.
Anybody.
So yes.
So
I don't think anybody was able to be there.
this most likely has a concrete bottom. We should be able to do some work there, but the fact that you've got all that vegetation that continues
Mhm,
going downstream, that's the big challenge.
mhm.
Because those take the restoration permits and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Clean out under that bridge, but it runs into a wall of dirt right after the bridge. It's not going to do much good.
Indeed. We're going to be continuing our clearing out of this particular area downstream, even starting next week. So if there's any sort of movement from any other place on creek mitigation, let us know. We'd love to coordinate.
And that's all we've got for you. The QR codes are for the Firebreak social media accounts. I don't know if you guys pull out your phones in these meetings, but I thought I'd throw them up there. And thank you so much for having us. And we're here to take any questions you guys might have.
Questions, council?
I have a question. First, is that the new LiDAR data and the findings, is that in any way available to the public? Is that?
Yeah, it should be housed on the UGRC website and
Okay.
could be publicly available. The last time that I checked on it with James Murphy, who's been sort of shepherding that through from the county,
Okay.
he said that the link was broken, but if you need it, thank you, Summer. But if you need to get your hands on the data or want to know about any of the findings that have happened so far, you can reach out to either me or James Murphy.
Okay,
But yeah, it will be publicly available if it's not now.
great. And then I just want to say that I live in a community that has shared ownership of a woodlands that actually creates the connection between Mill Creek and Pat Creek. And predating this community, it was completely overgrown with Russian olive and elms. And, the community has been working hard to try to put a dent in this, and it's just been completely ineffective. Clark and his crew came out in the fall and were able to, in a couple of weeks, clear this woodlands out. It's healthy, it's thriving, and more importantly, it's created a real distinct separation, a fire break between these two drainages that, as we know from the Pat Creek fire, could absolutely devastate this town. So huge thanks. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a couple.
Oh, go ahead. You go, Caitlin, you go first. I'll go last.
Can you talk a little bit more about the mix of, well, even backing up, can you talk about what fine fuels versus ladder fuel, like what are the types of fuels?
Sure.
Just a little bit of education on what fire fuels are.
Sure thing. So ladder fuels tend to be more of your tamarisk or your Russian olive. Think of something that really likes to grow and sort of leave dead branches behind or become that thicket or a brush, something that the fire can literally climb up and get into the canopy. Your fine fuels tend to be more of your cheatgrass or anything else that can essentially be mowed.
Thanks.
Clark, if you want to jump in.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome to.
Yeah, pine fuels, buy flashy fuels like grass, tumbleweeds, things like that. And the ladder fuels are just fuel that allows fire to move from the ground up into the trees.
Great, thanks. And then can you talk a little bit about the mix of projects that you're doing on public versus private properties, how you're kind of prioritizing both of those together?
So they are prioritized together, and a lot of it, like I said, had to do with the amount of fuels, the density, and then the proximity. So a lot of our public land tends to be a little more far flung. You're not getting nearly as much infrastructure risk with a lot of our public land, especially if you think of something like Pack Creek, which is almost entirely private land. So that tends to rank a little bit higher just because number one, it's denser. Number two, you have infrastructure concerns. And number three, you have neighboring properties. So I do use the same metric across both, mostly because they've both shaken out to somewhere that everybody has felt like the risk is appropriate. We've only really had one property that made us think that maybe the weighting was off. And that property was one that honestly, like it's definitely one that everybody knows the risk is the risk is intense given its location. However, because it doesn't have a primary residence on it, and because it does not endanger vital infrastructure, it tends to rank a little bit lower.
Thanks. Is that it? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes,
Any
no
other
problem.
council members? Questions?
I guess just kind of aside from like the obvious like funding and like human power, like resources or like limits on those, like what are the biggest obstacles that you all face, like potentially like institutionally, structurally, or anything like that from being able to like more effectively implement?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think probably one of our biggest problems is trying to get momentum for a lot of these properties. And that just comes with its own roadblocks, talking to property owners, then making sure that that timing actually works, finding crews to do that, and making sure that everybody is able to actually participate at the same time. That's probably been our biggest hurdle so far, is trying to get that, aside from potential funding pauses.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else? Couple questions from me. How are you guys going to manage revegetation when we have these floods along the creek? And what I've witnessed behind my house, which is city property, a lot of trees were cut down, and then all the bad lower fuels have grown up. Now some of them are 6 feet tall. I don't know how you guys are gonna be able to plant and re-veg back there when the trees have been removed and now we've got the other bad fuels.
You're not wrong. And it's one of the biggest problems that we're having with balance and getting in and doing that. And that's a lot of where Grand County Weeds has come in. The idea of coming in and mitigating those fine fuels and then being able to revegetate sometime in the fall to let them really get a foothold over the winter and try to take over by the following spring. But just like the devegetation process, your re-veg is an iterative process. So you can go in, you can plant, then you're still removing those fine fuels, and then you're planting more. So iterative process, a key piece of education as well, and encouraging the public, especially on their own properties, to try to figure out ways to really encourage that native growth.
Right, and I think we did that back there. We've replanted like twice and then we had flash floods, and so everything got, I mean, there was one little desert willow and it was like my little desert willow and then it was gone last one.
Yeah.
So I just think that's a big challenge, but I think it's a serious one because now we've got a lot of deadfall from the floods, all the debris, and it's all piling up back there. And so I don't know if that's part of your
It is.
fire mitigation plan to get rid of some of that stuff, because this wind and hot weather that we have, I was like on edge. It's like all it takes is somebody walking back there, because it is a path, smoking a cigarette, boom, it's on fire.
Yeah, debris and jackpots, trash, anything that can pile up, especially the flood debris, that tends to
Right.
tick properties very high on the priority matrix.
So this is all city. I think there's one piece of private property where that's an issue. Michael and I've talked about that.
And I think the city through this process has some new equipment, or will be getting new
Right,
equipment.
right.
Yeah, in fact, the $130,000 a year is in the new budget. And what that does is it supports equipment, and it also supports an FTE who can focus on this work for the city.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Excellent.
Employees.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just one request.
Yes.
Whenever they are cutting down the trees, I've noticed they tend to do it in the spring when the birds are migrating through and their babies are in their nests. So I just would request when we do some of those tree removals, that we don't do it right when the birds are having their babies or the birds are migrating through. Just a request. I've
Thing
been
to
out
keep in
there,
mind.
like, don't cut down that tree. There's a bird nest in there, and they've been really nice and said not to, but that's just something that I just have noticed. Sorry, I had to say that.
Someone has to think of the birds.
Yes, you know, I love the birds.
Good plug. Thank you.
So anything else for Bryce or Sophia? Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give out these little packets. There's one with kind of some of the fire outreach and then some with some of the flood outreach.
And if you guys have any further questions, you can contact us at any time. And if you have any properties you want us to look at, please contact us.
Okay, will do. Thanks. All right, next up, presentation from Michael on crosswalk standards for the city of Moab.
Okay, so recently we became, we know that there's been conversation with Trail Mix and with UDOT about high visibility crosswalks on Main Street. We've had that discussion ourselves with the RSA, which is the road safety assessment that we did with UDOT. And so the conversation has been out there for a little while, but we're launching into a discussion with UDOT regarding that. In fact, we'll be setting up a meeting soon. It is happening with UDOT and in the next few weeks. But while we were thinking about this and high visibility crosswalks, we were thinking, well, what is the city standard and what are we doing? And if high visibility crosswalks are good, are we doing them in the places, or is our policy supportive of that? So we did a little bit of research, and the team that I'm talking about here is our engineering, public works, strategic initiatives with Alexi and community development. We got together and we talked. And I talked to UDOT as well, and UDOT actually provided some information to us that is consistent with what we've been hearing from citizen groups and from citizens in particular. So crosswalk safety does matter, and high visibility crosswalks do have an impact on safety within the community. Now, there's a lot of information in this one pager, but the bottom line here is that when you couple several different things together, like high visibility crosswalks, lighting and signing and signalization, you end up getting a safer intersection for everybody. So it's pretty consistent with what we've been hearing. It's pretty consistent with what we think as well, but it's not consistent with what we've been applying on our roads. So if you look at our roads, a lot of the crosswalks are the line pattern, which you can see here, which is the standard down on the bottom. These are the different kinds of crosswalks that you generally see, except you never see the solid one. That's something, I don't know where they do that, but I don't think we see that very often. But these are the ones that we generally use, and we use the standard quite a bit, but we've been using the zebra more and more often in places where we are looking for higher visibility. In fact, UDOT came out and did several of the zebra crosswalks at places where they thought it fit with their policy, which is areas where a trail leads across the highway. So they were able to do that in a couple of those locations. But as we're looking at this and talking to our staff about it, our feeling is that why not adopt for the city of Moab a standard where we only use high visibility crosswalks and try to proliferate better within the community where those crosswalks go. And so what we're saying tonight is that we're looking for the support from the city council. These standards that we have are engineering standards that we use within the engineering department within community development. And what the plan is to change those so that we only use these 3 standards for crosswalks. I'm not a huge fan of the zebra myself, but it's being used in several places. There is thermoplastic down that has zebra already. It would make sense where those are that we continue to use those. But we would most likely use the Continental going forward with uncontrolled intersections. These streets around here where we don't have stop signs, where people travel through on the throughways, like on First South and Third South, and some of the blocks on Center Street. And then the areas where we have stop signs or controlled intersections within town, or even streetlights, we would be using the latter, not the latter, but the latter one. So it would be these 3 ones that I have starred, and we're looking at just making this effective immediately. The other thing we're looking at doing immediately and trying to get this ball rolling and set a good example here is to get a thermoplastic project out as soon as possible. And it is something that is in our budget for the next year. We talked about this. We'd like to get out a project as soon as possible, working on the kind of Old Town area first and the safe routes to schools, and then moving out from there. Now, most likely every intersection in the entire city won't have high visibility crosswalks. Some of the interior subdivisions where there's no sidewalk, things like that. But what we're going to be focusing on are areas where we know people walk a lot, where we have sidewalks and curb ramps that lead down to the street, and there's no crosswalk at all. And I think a lot of you are probably aware of a lot of those. And then also enhancing the crosswalks that we do already have to make them more visible. And then moving on from there, having that conversation with UDOT, which I do think UDOT is more than willing to come to the table and discuss this with us, and the possibility of doing these high visibility crosswalks on the highway. I can't speak for them, but I can speak for our conversations and saying that they've been more than open and talking about things and are willing to sit down with us and talk about the future of Main Street as well. And having a policy within the city of Moab that we use these will no doubt help that conversation. So that's my presentation. If you have any questions, happy to answer. Any concerns or?
I just want to say how excited I am for this new direction, and it's definitely something that I've had a lot of conversations with both Michael and the mayor about, and I'm so appreciative of the work you've done. You know, just to really kind of make an example here, riding over here to this meeting, you know, as an example of the era that we're leaving, I was coming down 4th East by Milt's Stop and Eat, and the crosswalk between Milt's and what is now the Rise Training Studio, 2 faded white parallel lines. But what we've done is we've put 2 baskets on light poles on either side of these faded parallel lines. And in these baskets are these little orange flags. And so rather than painting this beautiful high visibility crosswalk and bringing all this attention, you know, and recognition to this pedestrian infrastructure and this important place of crossing that services a school and the neighborhoods and eating establishments, we put all the responsibility on these people putting their lives in danger and crossing the street and asking them to carry a flag across the street. And so I'm so proud of the city of Moab for this new direction. I mean, we really are. This is going somewhere, and this is such a cost-effective and pretty simple safety enhancement. And you know, it's really gonna to show people that, you know, we're really serious about pedestrian safety, and that this is a place where people do walk and ride their bikes, and you know, our transportation environment is not auto-centric. You know, it's about everybody here. So thank you.
You bet.
Michael, can you talk a little bit about how, we have money in the budget to do sidewalks. Can you talk about how this would play into sidewalks and striping plans and if those are gonna be coordinated together?
Yeah, they definitely would be coordinated together. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about sidewalks and the plans and bids and things like that in my update. But the big things that I want to make sure are coordinated are the improvements that we're making to intersections where we're looking at doing bulb outs and things like that. Because high visibility crosswalks are great. Shorter distances between that the pedestrians have to walk through the street is better, and you start stacking those things onto each other, and we end up getting a much better product as well as lighting and signage and signalization. So the way that this would work is that through the roads fund, through the road budget, this would be a project through there. We do striping every year. We do a certain amount of striping. We do paint in some situations, which we just did a bunch of paint all over town, which I'm glad it was paint, because now we're moving to a different standard and we'll be able to go back in and not feel like we've spent a bunch of money painting crosswalks and then just replacing them with thermoplastic. Now, thermoplastic is much better because it lasts a lot longer. It's much hardier and it's reflective as well. It has a better reflectivity, and there's just a lot of things that are better about it. In our climate where we don't have a ton of snow and snow plows going down the road, they can last a lot longer than in other places. So that's the way we would approach it. And we will definitely coordinate all of these different projects that are going together to make sure we're not redoing things or redoing things is probably it. So.
Michael, you touched on one of my questions. What's the lifespan of this kind of treatment?
Thermoplastic.
5 years.
Yeah, versus just paint.
I think it depends on the travel, the number of trips per day on the street. So Highway 191 is going to be different than First South. But what do you think?
Yeah, if anything, probably we might be replacing the thermoplastics sooner. It just becomes so scuffed up and what's the word I'm looking for here?
Yeah, but years.
Good color. Yeah, they're fairly thick. We've got some out here for I think about 5 years now. I think that are still going strong. We've just got to clean everything. So relatively low traffic, low speed roads, they seem to wear out a whole lot slower.
Okay.
And just for like comparison's sake, if we're just looking at paint, like how frequently do we have to repaint?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sort of depends on the spot, but we did a real quick light treatment where we had missed the mid-block crossing on the dispersed part of the project that was driving by, and it's already starting to wear through. It could be like a year or a few years or even less.
If you look at we just did the bus stop down on Main, and we had them just use paint because we added it on to the contract that UDOT was doing, and it's already faded and needs to be replaced with thermoplastic. So paint is not a good alternative. That's why they use it to do the locates, because it disappears after a while. So anyways.
Any other questions?
Do also want to note that this is one of our priorities. This is an action item for one of our priorities that Alexi is going to be presenting on in just a minute. And so this is we're already ticking things off.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
It's great. Yep.
Way to go.
Good team. Team go.
All right. Anything else on crosswalks, sidewalks? All right. We have no department head reports. We have 2 items on our consent agenda: approval of the minutes from June 10th regular meeting and approval of the bills against the city of the Moab in the amount of $1,792,339.83. If I could have a motion to approve.
I can make that motion.
Motion by Colin,
I'll second.
second by Tawny. Any discussion, Colin?
I would just like to say that the bulk of those bills are going to what I believe is the final installment of the Cane Creek project.
Yep. Tawny? Anyone else? All in favor of approval of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. 2-0 with Jason not in attendance this evening. All right, we had an addendum to our agenda, which is regarding fireworks restrictions. I realize that next week is the 4th of July. It's been windy and dry and hot. And so we do have an ordinance in place. And I think Lex,
Yeah.
Michael and Lex are going to be talking about fireworks restrictions that will be in place starting
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, Lex is on his way up. We've had some discussions and I've discussed this with our city attorney as well and talked to the fire chief, and Lex can give you the details and all that.
Basically, they're the same as they were in 2023 and 2022 and 2021, 2024. The restrictions for Moab City, this is city limits, no burning within city limits, open burning of yard waste or any other debris is always prohibited. But specifically the fireworks, they are restricted from parkways, public trails, and pedestrian paths in the city. City parks, except Center Street ball fields. Over or within 200 feet of Pat Creek or Mill Creek, within 20 feet of any residence, building, structure, or combustible material. And violations are subject to a $1,000 fine, up to a $1,000 fine, and possible jail time. Fireworks that are never allowed, fireworks that fly, explode, or travel more than 6 feet off the ground, aerial and flash shells, Roman candles, comets, and mortars, firecrackers, bottle and aerial rockets, other similar explosives. And we'd ask that people report fireworks violations to our dispatch at 435-259-8115. And of course, we'll be out and, responding on these calls. Typically, you get one warning, and we don't like to write tickets for this sort of thing. And we hope that if you're respectful with us and we're respectful with you, one time us coming and saying, knock it off works, but don't make us come back with a ticket.
Great.
And be
Yes.
respectful.
And use common sense. That'd be a good thing too. Just to follow up with that, we do have a press release that's ready to go and ready to get out there so that we can get this information out as far as wide as we can. We'll put that on Facebook as well, and wherever else Lisa typically does that. And we'll update our news stories on our website too, so it pops up to the top.
Thanks, Lex.
Good luck.
All right,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Look,
See you at the parade.
yeah, I also believe that the fire department is putting out fire restrictions this week as well.
Yes,
So
there's
a broader range of fire restrictions than just fireworks.
yes, we're pretty much in red flag as it is, and it's not getting any better. So, right. All right. We next up 6.1 consideration and adoption of the Moab's 25-26 strategic plan. Alexi.
Okay. We've already gone through most of the things in the strategic plan. So my plan for today is to go directly to the biggest change, which is the addition of information under Walnut Lane as one of our top priorities. And then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so let's skip to Walnut Lane. Here, we added Michael and I put in some text here, highlighting that Walnut Lane addresses the community's workforce housing needs, and then putting in some action items to pay off the property, to do a thorough engagement process, work on a plan for things that we can do to move towards whatever solution or outcome that we're looking for. And then setting up benchmarks for accountability, and then pursuing funding and partnerships to pursue whatever plan we come up with. So that is the biggest change. Other than that, the changes were relatively small and related to our previous conversations. Does anybody have discussion about the Walnut Lane section?
I think it's as good of direction to set a number of directions as
Yeah.
we get. So
yeah,
good job on that.
we did it then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any questions about any of the other changes that were in the plan? I would say the only other significant addition, other than adding a few words here or there, was adding an Appendix B, a summary of where we are in last year's strategic plan. So none of this is actually new. It's just a summary of what is our ClearGov, but that's the only other significant change. Are there any questions about any of the other changes?
All right.
Good job.
Yep, nice job, Alexi. Motion to approve our strategic plan.
I move to adopt ordinance 2025-08, an ordinance amending the. Oh, no, sorry, I have the wrong thing open. Oh, I move to adopt resolution 09-2025. Adopting a City of Moab fiscal year 2025-2026 strategic plan.
Motion by Luke, second.
A second.
Second by Caitlin. Discussion, Luke.
No, I think great job. Really appreciate your patience with us and all the changes that you've made. And this isn't anything like directly in the strategic plan, but just as I was reading through, like with the public engagement, I just kind of remembered that in the past we just wanted to make sure that there's some sort of like extra focus on trying to get engagement from typically underrepresented groups, just so we get a broader swath of like, or broader perspective from the community. But other than that, great job. Really appreciate it.
Caitlin.
Ditto. I think that the way you guys have walked us through and taken a fresh look at our existing strategic plan, I really appreciate the appendix of all of the plans, and that, you know, implementing plans in itself is a priority for us. I think just seeing the list of all of the plans that the city has adopted and or created in the last, 8 years is extensive. And so I just really appreciate this approach to kind of take a more comprehensive look at strategic initiatives for the city. So thank you.
Anybody else? All right, call for the vote. All those in favor of approval of the Moab City Strategic Plan 25-26, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Thanks, Alexi.
Thank you.
Next up, we have consideration of approval of a special event permit for the 2025 USARA Recovery Day event. Kelly's going to present this to you all. If you all are aware, USARA is a great organization that works with a lot of other organizations to help our addicted community with addiction, and they have an event. It's their 10th year of USARA being in existence, and so this year's kind of a big deal for them. One of the things that they've requested that is not in your packet is a waiver of the permit fees. So when you go to make your motion on this, if you can consider that as an option, that would be great.
Thank you. So this particular event is held in September each year. This year it will be Thursday, September 4th. They started out at the ball fields a couple of years ago, and it's kind of grown. They've since moved to Swanee Park, and this is a free, family-friendly event. There's no ticket sales. It's held by USARA, which is Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness, and they have a lot of community partners doing tabling and activities. There's no alcohol at this event, so there's no beer garden or anything like that. And we're coming to you because this has been a renewal permit for them for a level 1 event, but they've kind of grown and it's gotten a little bit bigger, so they're going to hit that level 2 threshold now. Other than that, there are no significant changes.
Questions? I will be reading a proclamation. I did that last year. I'll be doing that again this year for that event.
And was this event a RAP recipient?
No.
This is
Don't believe
just
so.
something else with USARA. Okay.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah, they
just
did
their-
state nights with.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Is there a motion?
Do you want to have the fee?
Well, how much is the fee, Kelly?
A level 2 permit is $820.
$820. So the question is approving their permit and if you would consider modifying or reducing the fee or waiving the fee.
I can make a motion to approve this permit, and along with waiving the use fee for Swanee Park.
Motion by Colin, second.
I'll second.
Second by Luke. Discussion, Colin.
None.
Luke?
No, just really appreciative of USARA and everything that they do for this community and just how well they partner with other organizations to kind of provide those wraparound services for vulnerable members of our community. But
Anybody else?
I'm not gonna vote against this because I do think it's a good event. I wish we'd have entertained reducing the fee because we haven't waived fees for a long time, but I'm not gonna stand its way either.
Anybody else?
Would you make an amended motion? This is something that I was thinking about, especially with the master fee schedule. I think looking at events like we have discounts for the Mark. I'm wondering if we should have discounts for, all of our parks and rec facilities following that same structure. I think that's one of the intentions of the master fee schedule. So I guess I would make an amended motion, a substitute motion, to, in accordance with the Marks policies, provide a 50% discount to USARA for the special event permit fee.
Motion by
What do you think?
Caitlin to approve the special event permit with a 50% reduction in the fee.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Sure.
So there's the permit fees, the special event permit fees. There's also like perks fees associated with special events as well. So just clarification on whether that's park use fees or permit fees.
So is 820 the total cost?
That's the permit fee. So
permit
there's
fee.
still like
I
Swanee
think we're
Park fee
talking
on
about
top
the
of that.
permit fees.
Well, Colin's motion was to waive the fees for Swanee Park, so that's actually a good clarification, which is different from the special event.
Yeah.
and were they requesting to like either reduce or eliminate all fees or just the permit fees?
When I talked to the email that I got, it was just the permit fee. It wasn't the park fees.
How much would park fees be?
I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. I think it's I want to say on that one we have a locals rate, so they would get that rate for it, and it's based on number of hours and whether they're using the whole park or the full park. So theirs is I want to say a couple hundred on that.
Yeah, that's what I think it was.
That sounds right.
And that's going for maintenance and helping set up, or if there's any
And-
needs, anything like that, that our park staff might have to provide.
Looks like $150 for 100 to 300 people, if I'm reading this correctly.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So your motion was to reduce the permit fee by 50%. Okay, I would second that motion.
All right, so we vote on the substitute motion first. Caitlin's motion is to approve the special event permit for 2025. USARA Recovery Day went with a 50% reduction in the permit fees. That's seconded by Tawny. Any further discussion, Caitlin?
I would love to support this. I appreciate everything you guys do. Just especially because we are talking about our master fee schedule. I think that, this is kind of a discussion. Our fee schedule right now says the city may only waive special event permit fees for a free speech event.
I'm going to be making a free speech.
So I guess if we want to call it that, we can, but I guess this kind of indication to me that we should consider what discounts we're doing across the board.
Tawny?
So
I agree. Like I said, it's a good event, but I think once we start waiving entire fees, everybody's gonna, we had this discussion years and years, because we we weren't collecting anything or very nominal amount of fees. And so I think past councils have kind of put their foot down and said, we can discount things to a reasonable amount, but we're not going to waive entire fees because there's still a cost to the city. So.
All right, motion by Caitlin, second by Tawny. All those in favor say aye.
Wait, do we get to?
Oh, do you guys want to discuss? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, Luke.
No,
go
you can't
ahead.
talk. It's not free
Then I'll
speech
call
for
for the
this.
quit. Yeah, right.
I'm like a little conflicted, partially because I think a lot of the events that are going to take up like an entire park or something like that are paid events where people like would pay. And so like the offsets of, or sorry, the costs of the permit fees can be offsets by some of like the admission costs and everything like that. And just having attended these events, this really is a collection of a lot of local nonprofits and like service providers that provide a lot of really valuable education to the community and community members in ways that I think can actually help reduce costs for the city by kind of reducing like the number of emergency like calls that they need to respond to. And yeah, I think the costs of like renting parts of the mark are significantly different than they are for like a level 2 permit fee. And I don't know, just having worked alongside you, Sarah, like there has been a lot of money kind of like in terms of like opiate and like substance use disorder, but like that's drying up like pretty quickly. And I know that they have stretched like every penny that they could in the past to be able to like put on these really well received, like I think the fact that this is a growing thing like really speaks to kind of the need and the reception and the appreciation from the community for kind of helping celebrate people who, I don't know, I think everybody in one form or another is impacted by addiction, whether directly or indirectly. And yeah, I know I'm biased coming from like the nonprofit world and like wanting to like provide like free services wherever we can, just knowing that goes a long way. But yeah, I'm still ultimately in favor of just a limit, like waiving the entire fee. Like there still will be the park fee, which from my understanding in a lot of ways is like kind of to help offset the impact that the event would have like on the grounds. So I think like to that degree that is covered. I don't know, I guess like what is the intent for the permitting fees? Is that the other staff labor that went into like helping organize and arrange the event?
That's my understanding of it. So it goes through a full staff review. Every event does, whether it's renewal or a new event.
And it goes all the way from Kelly's office to the police department, the fire department, through all of those different means. It definitely makes its rounds. There's definitely work on the back end as well. And then it goes into the general fund, and the general fund, of course, supports the larger general fund departments like the police department and so on. So
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Have we waived the special event permit for level 1 for this event in the past?
No.
No.
They've never been level 1 in the past.
They were level 1, now they're level 2. So the level 1 permit fee is $466.
Yeah. So I guess even with a 50%, that'd be less than the permit fee they've paid in the past, but.
Got a comment. I'm gonna, I appreciate this discussion greatly, but I'm gonna stick with my original position. Though I did state it wrong, with the waiving of application fees is what I'm gonna stick with. This feels different to me. This, the city contributes to some other events at the Swanee Park, the Arts Fest. The city contributes RAP funds to several other events that are at Swanee Park, different ways the city supports these events. This particular event, there is no monetary exchange whatsoever at this event between vendors, between participants, organizers, everything. And so, I think this is, I appreciate Caitlin's reference to what is stated as grounds for waiving this. I think that this should be a new approach or a new opportunity to support events like this. So thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is still happening, once again, kind of like funding cuts, but I do know in the past, like there's been distribution of like Narcan kits and like other supplies that go out into the community to help like people better respond to like overdoses and things like that. And so I'd much rather funds go towards things like that can kind of ripple out into the community and have a positive impact in that regard, rather than kind of like, yeah, $800 or $400 isn't an insignificant amount, but relative to our budget, it's a very, very small rounding error. Whereas I think equipping somebody with the knowledge and the equipment to better respond to a situation at home, I think the value of that really outweighs what the city would potentially benefit from the permit fee here.
All right, we have a motion by Caitlin, second by Tawny, approve the fee with a 50% reduction in the fee. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I get to break the tie. I go with the opposition. Next, we go back to Colin's motion.
Do you like
and
me
we-
to restate that motion?
Yes.
Okay.
You want me? Oh, actually, I need to call a roll call because we have in the negatives. Caitlin, how do you vote?
For substitute?
Yes.
Aye.
Colin,
Nay.
Tawny? Aye. Luke?
No,
Joette's a nay. Motion fails. 2-3 with Colin, Luke, Joette in opposition. Our next motion that was made by Colin, seconded by Luke, was to approve this special event permit for 2025 USAR recovery event with a waiver of the permit fees entirely. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 4-0. There you go. Good discussion. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelly.
Okay. Marcy, I believe you're up. Our next item is a public hearing for ordinance 25-08, an ordinance amending Title III of the Moab Municipal Code to update Chapter 3.5 Master Fee Schedule and modifying certain fees, rates, and charged by the city. This was reviewed by our planning commission and gave a favorable recommendation to the city. And so I will open the public hearing at 7:04 p.m. Marcy, is going to give us a brief description of what you guys are considering tonight, and then we'll close the public hearing and have discussion.
Hold on a second, I'm getting connected to Zoom. And actually on this one, I don't have anything to actually share. I'm not doing a presentation on this one. So I'll just do a quick summary. So we did a minimum of $85 rate for the building department last year. And so what the majority of the changes that you're seeing on the master fee schedule this round was us correcting the rest of the fees to be in line with the 85%, or sorry, the $85 minimum rate that we did. So for the particular master fee schedule, one of the things that Corey wanted me to know is the state is actually putting a lot of pressure on building departments in general and planning departments to have a lot more involvement, and they have to do a lot more things than we've ever had to do before, which is a huge financial impact on the building and planning department. So, excuse me, that's why you're seeing some of these major changes on that program. And I'm so sorry, I need to open up I had the wrong one open. Are you? Oh, I did have it open. Okay, and then you're also going to see some changes or additions to the parks and facilities
Section Swanee Park was added as an administration portion. We were already charging the fees, but it wasn't actually on the master fee schedules, and it's in line with all the other parks for the fees for that. And then we had a couple of corrections that were just errors, like oversights that just never got updated with other master fee schedules. So we did some minor corrections and then changing verbiage for planning, like director to coordinator. And then other than that, it should be relatively straightforward unless you guys have questions.
Questions for Marcy on the master fee schedule? All right, no questions. Thank you, Marcy. I'll open it up to the public. Anybody from the public would like to comment? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at 7:06 PM and ask for a motion to approve the adoption of ordinance 25-08, amending Title III of the Moab Municipal Code to update the master fee schedule.
Since I got a little ahead of myself last time and started reading this one, I will move to adopt ordinance 2025-08 and ordinance amending the Moab Municipal Code Title 3.50 master fee schedule as presented.
Motion by Luke, second by
I'll second.
Tawny. Discussion, Luke?
No.
Tawny?
No.
Anybody else?
I think I just reiterating based on our previous conversation, I ultimately agree with Tawny. It doesn't feel, I support you, Sarah. I support so many of the nonprofits that are there. I think for things like that, we've also had conversations about community contributions. I think having more policies about how and why we waive fees is something I'd love to see moving forward. Maybe not necessarily in, I'm not gonna, this is what it is. But I think just, along the lines of us wanting to work on formalizing those, I'd put that forward for future.
And I appreciate that insight because I think it ultimately prevents us from making arbitrary decisions and ideally kind of can eliminate any sort of casting of doubt as to why somebody got something and somebody didn't. So
Right. Yeah. Anybody else? Motion by Luke, seconded by Tawny. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Marcy, you don't need to leave because you're up pretty soon, so you might as well just stay there. I know you don't like being in the spotlight, but
I was like, I thought Michael was next.
this should be
I'll
fast.
be looking at you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Just hide under the table.
Focus on her.
Yes. So,
Michael.
next up, item 6.5, consideration of adoption of resolution 08-2025, a resolution amending the fiscal year budget. As you recall, we tabled this at our last meeting until this meeting because we didn't have the right document in the paper. Since then, Michael has provided you all with the correct information. Nothing has changed.
Yeah. Slight change. To go down, of course. The updated document tells you what those changes are.
Right. And didn't we just get the information for the sales tax?
We did, yeah. So just really quick, the changes in here, generally speaking, are changing to actuals where we know we're not going to spend up to the amount that was budgeted. And some of that will be carried forward to next year. Some of those projects just aren't being done. But the total net reduction in all of the line items is over $1 million. But the budget does show us going up just a little bit because we are adding 2 transfers out of the general fund to this budget. One of them is to the RAP tax fund. It shows $1.2 million. The actual transfer will be more in the line of $980,000 because the amount I needed to subtract the grants amount, which wasn't subtracted before, but that's the actual amount of the RAP tax. No need to change anything. We'll just transfer the actual amount. The other change that led to the increase in the budget was just transferring the money to pay off or to assist the housing fund in paying off the Walnut Lane loan. And those are both from general fund ending fund balance.
And we discussed both of those at our last meeting.
We did.
So now the amended budget is the final budget, final actuals for 24-25. So that's what we'll be comparing throughout the year. Questions on that? Motion. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt resolution 08-2025 approving the fiscal year 2024-2025 year-end budget amendment as presented in the resolution.
Motion by Luke, second.
I'll second.
Second by Caitlin. Discussion, Luke?
Nope.
Caitlin.
Thank you for
Yeah.
making the changes.
Getting the right attachment, yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
We're
we
all
felt so bad about that, I'm telling you.
We're
I
all
mean,
calling
down for days.
It was great, you know. At least you know I'm actually looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else? This will be a roll call. Caitlin.
Aye.
Colin.
Aye.
Connie.
Aye.
Luke.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Very good. All right, next, Marcy. Consideration of adoption of ordinance 2025-12, an ordinance adopting the city of Moab's residential utility assistant pilot program. As you all recall, this is something that we instituted in January because of the property tax. We recognized that there were some folks out in the community that the property tax was going to have some impact on, and we wanted to make sure that we could help offset some of that property tax cost through our utilities. Marcy's done a great job of pulling some information together to share with you guys. I think the two things you need to be thinking about that are additions to this program, because based on information that we got from you in January, we did it for 6 months. We want to extend the pilot for another 6 months to make sure the changes that Marcy's recommended are, workable and, feasible. We want to promote it a little bit more. But the two things that you need to be focusing on is the criteria to qualify and then the renter component, which is what we added based on suggestions from you all. Now, with that said, also we got a document from Caitlin that has a lot of cleanup language in it that I think we don't need to go into. I've talked to Caitlin about it. Marcy and Michael have looked at it. It's not really anything substantial. It just makes the document stronger. And so whatever you guys decide, that those changes could be made after the fact administratively. But what we need to really be focusing on is the criteria and then the renter program. So Marcy?
Perfect. Well, I hope everybody had an opportunity to review the data that I put in the packet. I put quite a bit in there to try to cover all the bases because it is a brand new program that we've never done before and a program that I had to do a lot of research to figure out how to do. So thank you all for your patience as we work through the first 6 months of the program. So just to give a quick summary, I know the mayor just kind of touched on this a little bit, but the program was originally approved in December under the ordinance of 2024-06 for the 6-month period. It's due to expire on June 30th. The program is in place for low-income families with a up to $40 a month, up to a $40 a month per utility account payment applied to the utility account. That's like for water, sewer, and stormwater that you're going to see these for. This is available for owners and renters. So what we're going to touch on is some of the changes that we're looking at, mostly for renters, not owners, because of some, what is the word I'm looking for? Some hiccups that we ran into where we couldn't, I was like, it was not hiccups, but that one worked.
Yeah.
Some hiccups that we ran into with not being able to approve everybody that did apply for the program for various reasons because the program had some limitations. Okay, so the original pilot program, we had low participation. Unfortunately, I can't really explain why. We did have it in the paper. Doug actually put it in the paper for us originally. And as people would call in, we'd offer the program to them. We only used about $3,000 of the $75,000 that was budgeted for this for the 24-25 fiscal year. So I won't go into much detail on this original pilot overview because it was in the packet. All of this information was provided, but I did want to touch on a couple of the denials. So we had, I think it was 7. Oh no, sorry, 5. We had 5 apartment residents who called for this program. And because they're an apartment complex, the utility bill is not broke out. It's like one utility bill that's for everybody. MAPS program, or the MAPS building is one of these. And 4 of those 5 came from MAPS that called for the utility assistance program. But unfortunately, the original program, it wasn't something we considered for apartment complexes or things of that nature. So we kind of ran into a little bit of frustration on our side and also on the citizen side, because it is money that they could have absolutely used. And because of that hurdle of not having a utility account, we had no way of adding that into or allowing them to apply to the program. So I'm hoping that with tonight's review that that's something we can consider for the next 6-month pilot program. And as the mayor said, we want to do a 6-month pilot program because of the substantial changes we are making on this. So why we need these revisions, only 16 applications came in. 7 of those we didn't have 7 on there because they were out of city limits. So we didn't do 7 applications. It was just an automatic denial because they weren't within city limits. So they weren't impacted with the city property tax like the other applicants were. So we only had 16 applications with the capacity of $75,000, we could help 156 applicants with 12 months of subsidy at the with a flat $40 rate. That's saying that they apply and they're approved in July 1 through June 30th, if that makes sense. So having such a low approval rate or, people applying made it a little bit harder for us to review the program and be able to make sure that we were able to assess the true needs of the community. So we're hoping with some of these revisions that we can jump over some of these barriers that we had with the renters, like I explained with apartment complexes and things of that nature. We didn't have any in Grand Oasis, but Grand Oasis would also fall in this, so trailer parks, because they don't have separate utility accounts. It's one big account that covers the individual utility accounts. The other thing is we want stronger documentation from our applicants. So it was brand new to us. We didn't really know what we were going to need. And as we started to dive into this, it was a little bit hard to get certain documents from some of the applicants that applied for the program. And while we found ways to make it work, we did learn that a lot of people don't have access to a computer and they couldn't print things for us, so they couldn't email things to us. And so what I was able to do is actually work with them by just waiting for their documents to come in and then get them approved, because they have to have them mailed to them or things like that. So doing more documentation and having more consistency in the program, I think will make it easier for the application process, because now we know what we need and what we can put out to the community that we're expecting. The last thing that I want to note is while we were working through the applications for all of our applicants that we got, we had a lot of feedback from the community, but then I also met with the mayor and Michael, and we did a lot of review. And so because of the things that the hurdles, again, mostly the renter portion, that really is the biggest part. And the second part of that is the income level that we wanted to take a look at. So with those two things, the program needed almost like a half rewrite, essentially, to accommodate some of these things. And sorry, I start rambling, so bear with me. Okay, so we've kind of touched quite a bit on a lot of the recommended key program updates in general. So I won't go into too much detail on this portion of it, but I think that the biggest thing that we're going to see here is we're recommending that we change the income levels from federal poverty levels to area median. What is it? Area median income? Thank you. AMI. I had notes on it. I just can't see them without it being in presentation mode. Okay, so what that does is it actually raises the income levels. Federal poverty levels at 185% is still pretty low, even at the 185% level. So low for Moab. Thank you. Yes, that's correct. It is very low for Moab. And so Michael was actually like, wait, we should be using the AMI. And I was like, that's actually a really good point. So I'm going to jump to that. So here's a compare. In your council doc or the council packet, you're going to see that we as staff are recommending a 70% of the AMI. After I put this in the slideshow, I realized that we have a little bit of a disconnect. So first of all, a family of 4 at 70% AMI is actually lower than 185% poverty level. So one of the recommendations that we want to make is we actually do 80%. And Caitlin actually recommended this to us, that we either look at 50% or 80%. 50% will put us below the federal poverty level of 185%, which is currently approved in the program. So the 80% would give us a little bit more inflation for the approval limits for applicants and kind of open this up a little bit more. If you don't recall, or if you didn't get a chance to read the rejection portions, we did have one person that did not meet the threshold criteria, and they were literally off by $1,500, I think is what I said. So, I mean, it was really sad that, I mean, it was such a small amount, but it was based on the limitations we had. We couldn't approve it. So in this case, if we use the AMI for Grand County, the 80% is going to really increase like our family sizes of 1, 2, and 3. And then you're only going to see a slight increase for families of 4. So a family of 4 on the AMI 80% is the $71,650. If we use the federal poverty level for a family of 4, it's $59,477. So that little bit of money will actually, I believe, would make a huge difference, but also ensure that we're keeping the program within the acceptable range for low-income families. If we raise this too high, then we run the risk of giving the money to people who do need it. I mean, you guys know Moab is very expensive to live in, and inflation is real, especially in a resort town. So in this case, it still gives us some control in making sure that the people who really need this program can receive these benefits. If we were to hit the 156, we have to cut the program. We have to put it at a standstill until we either re-review it at the end of the 6 months, or we increase, or whatever may happen. So I think that I would recommend that we increase to 80%. Michael has agreed to the 80% as well, just based on our quick finding that.
Recommended as well.
Yes, thank you. And so that will be one revision that's in the ordinance that I state 70% instead of 80%. And so thank you, Caitlin, for mentioning that to us as well on there. And then this one is just another quick recap. You know, we only used $3,000 of the $75,000 budgeted last year for this program. We're recommending the we're recommending a 6-month extension at $75,000 again, which will still cover us for the whole year. It doesn't mean that we have to reapprove or do a budget adjustment with the $75,000. We just figured we would carry that forward, just with the notation on how the program went for the first 6 months. And then changing the federal poverty level isn't going to impact us as much as I think that, I mean, we want it to impact us a little bit more because we want to see more people utilizing the program. So I'm hoping that that change will be essential. And then other than that, everything in there is pretty cut and dry. Any questions?
Questions?
Yeah. So kind of aside from some of the advertising about the program in the paper, and then when people call in and you offer it up, like what other approaches do we take to outreach or educating people about the existence of this program?
So one of the things that we are doing in my office is if somebody calls and say like they're late on their bills often, you know, we know that they're struggling. We actually recommend the program to them. So that's one outreach that we're doing, where somebody comes in and they're like, man, I'm just really struggling. And we work with everybody on their utility bills. It is not our goals to shut people off. We're like, if you can't pay it, give us a call. We have a program. We can set you up on a 6-month repayment plan or whatever it is. So that's one outreach we do. I believe that, I mean, I don't want to speak for Lisa, but I believe that we'll probably put it on the website. It'll go in the paper. We have it posted. I'm sure that we could put it out to
Our partners as well.
Our partners, yeah.
Partners will receive it as well. So you can put on bulletin boards and places that will interact with people who potentially could use it, will know about it, and be able to refer people.
And we'll put it on the utility bills too, because we have the ability to put messages on our bills. And so we utilize that to notify the public in a mass. And then I can also look at Express Bill Pay, putting a message, like a temporary message on Express Bill Pay, where a lot of people pay their bills, to note that this program is available and how they can apply.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And I think potentially even giving the application out to like MVMC and CKhaven so that they can fill it out alongside their advocates would ideally help kind of address some of like the lack of technology or anything like that, but also not adding more burden to city staff to kind of take that on. And then I maybe not now, but seeing how kind of all these like additional things increase participation in the program, but even being proactive where like if you see there are certain households falling behind, like to proactively reach out to them and just be like, hey, this program's available, here are the qualifications, like so they can be a little bit more kind of like self-filtering, because I think right now with the approach that like is being taken is people have to be proactive to get informed about it. And I don't know, when I was a young 20-year-old and was like not easily paying bills, there was times where I just didn't even want to open up my bill, let alone like call and like reach out to somebody. So, but yeah, I'd like to see how kind of the changes in terms of like collaborating with partners, kind of the more concerted advertising and like making it more readily visible on the bills and like online will impact participation rates, but potentially some a feather to stick in a hat like later on.
Yeah, just to elaborate on your comments too. I mean, a lot of older people that are on Social Security won't reach out because they are embarrassed, or, you know, it's just like, we don't take subsidies. So your point of being a little more proactive is not a bad idea.
Yeah, and we do over the phone. We just haven't done like the mass outreach as far as like what you're referring to, but we do try to reach out, and I do want to know, especially for the community, like their information is confidential. Right now, there is only one person in the city, which is myself, that can review your income levels, that is looking at your highly confidential, very sensitive information. And so we do emphasize that like this information is not public. It cannot be released. It is not something somebody can grandma. It is very restricted. It's locked away in my office for anything that I do have to keep, and other things that I don't have to keep where I just can review it. It's not kept on file, and I don't discuss it. I mean, you can ask the mayor. I was like, I can't talk to you about specifics, but here's a summary. And I don't say like this person makes this much or this person makes this much or who's on the program. That's completely confidential to everybody except myself and of course my two staff members, because they're helping with the billing. But we know how important it is and how people are embarrassed and don't want to come to us because of that simple fact, and because they have to go face to face. It's not like, you know, workforce services where you just make a phone call. They you know, a lot of them have to come in, and we are willing to sit down and help them. Like we have no problem going through and filling out. Like usually I've had like 3 people set up meetings with me. They come into my office, we shut the door. I fill out their application for them and they literally just sign it. And so we don't mind doing those extra steps, but also I kind of went off on a tangent, but we want to make sure that they understand that we keep their information very confidential, and we're not here to judge. Yeah. We understand. I myself have been in positions where these programs would have been very beneficial for me, especially when I was younger. So.
No, and I really appreciate you highlighting that, because like particularly in a small town, like when we see people like kind of avoiding going to a therapist because it might get out that like they're trying to seek help. But another thing that just popped up is there any sort of like database or like a quick way for some of these partner organizations to be able to identify if the individual or family that they're working with is actually residing in the city, so that you don't get like a flood of potentially ineligible people?
Yeah, I can actually provide a list of all addresses in city limits that would be searchable. I could just create an Excel spreadsheet that just has strictly addresses, and they could just do a quick search in there by address only. It wouldn't have names or anything tied out to it, so that it would make it a little bit easier, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, no,
Luke,
it was just like a almost everyday occurrence, like when I was working at Sea Haven, where like people would get funneled to different organizations that do have these supportive programs, but like they don't qualify. And so it kind of puts an extra like burden on the staff there. And it also sucks being that staff member that this person got sent over there, took time out of their day by somebody who they trust, only to be told like, actually, no, you don't qualify.
Yep.
And so just kind of in terms of helping maintain like those collaborative working relationships with their clients for like the partner organizations, and then ultimately just like making things more efficient.
Agreed.
Questions?
Yeah, I think related to that, I'd probably also recommend sending this to like property management companies as well. Potentially, you know, especially because it is a pass-through benefit for them. If they have people falling behind on rent, this is another solution for them. But yeah, I think partner organizations would be great. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of especially thinking about this potentially being 150 households to manage. I'm wondering how you and your department are feeling about kind of flows and workloads and kind of barriers for how the program's going so far, how it would feel to expand it.
Yeah, Michael and I have talked extensively about this, and the way that the program is built, we've made it pretty streamlined that I don't believe we'll have any issues managing that.
Great.
And
Yeah.
if there were, we would talk about it, and that would be something that I would definitely be working with her on. And if the council needed to be involved and we needed to look at budget adjustments or more staff, we'd be talking about that.
Good.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Well, just in general, yes, I sent some recommended language. I think a lot of that was administrative to kind of clarify. I have had experience with unclear code, and that you know, when it comes to social services and kind of housing related people things, it gets really complicated. So just want to reiterate, you guys have done an amazing job. I think that the way that the city has designed this to be really simple for applicants and for administration is honestly not common for these types of services. So thank you for your work, and yeah, mostly providing those to provide clarification, because household situations are complicated, especially as we open it up to renter situations. So that was my intent. Yeah, I'm supportive of 80% AMI. I think that that's a pretty standard metric, especially when we're starting to dive a little bit more into the housing world. That's kind of the a lot of housing support systems are following that kind of AMI. So that'd be my recommendation. That said, I think that like projects like MAPS, like the tax credit projects, go up to 55%. But yeah, 80 would be my recommendation on that. I'm sure I have other questions. I'm sure they're noted in the document I already sent you.
Caitlin, you're welcome to reach out to Marcy, you know,
Yeah.
unless there are questions that are gonna impact how you vote tonight. You know, if they're just things that you need clarification for, I'd suggest you talk to Michael and Marcy.
Yeah.
If you're cool with that.
Yeah, for sure. Perfect.
Any other questions for Marcy? All right, I'll ask for a motion to adopt ordinance 2025-12, an ordinance adopting the City of Moab Residential Utility Assistance Pilot Program. This will be a pilot, considering you approve it through the end of this year, and then we'll revisit again in January.
I move to approve or adopt ordinance 2025-12, an ordinance amending the City of Moab Residential Utility Assistance Pilot Program policy.
Do we need to amend it with the 80%?
Yes, would you mind including to change the AMI to 80% and include Caitlin's recommend for administration to review Caitlin's recommended changes? Sorry. I was hoping Caitlin was gonna make the motion.
You jumped the gun.
Yep.
So moved.
Oh, I really got myself into it. With the 80% AMI and the administrative changes recommended by council.
One second.
All right, motion by Colin, second by Luke. Any further discussion?
I would just like to say thank you, and it's really neat to see this program evolve and change and really become a great community resource and safety net. So thanks, Marcy, for your hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, just kind of echoing that, like with the recommendations and kind of the things that were identified, there's clearly been a lot of like introspection about like what's working and what's not working. And there's a clear desire to make this one to work to benefit the community as much as it can. So really appreciate kind of sticking to it and proposing all these changes that I think are going to have like a material positive impact on this program.
Anybody else?
Yep, I just appreciate the humanity that you've used in developing this and it's very obviously a conscious effort. So thank you.
Anybody else? I'll call for the vote. Roll call. Caitlin?
Hi.
Colin?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Four, what did I say? Okay, yeah, 4. I
Just-
counted myself. I counted myself.
Thank you.
All right, our last item of general business is ratification of a letter of intent regarding providing financial support for the Grand County pickleball courts. Normally I would have put this on a consent agenda, except for I didn't have a chance to talk to everybody before we sent the letter. But essentially the county has some funding, a grant funding to do pickleball courts out at OSTA. They're struggling right now with some budgetary issues, and we just wanted to let them know that we would be happy to help financially with the pickleball portion of that grant. I learned that on Monday they had a budget workshop and the cost of the pickleball courts is around $440,000. We offered half up to 50% of the match, which would be $220, and we would pay half of that, which would be $110. We weren't quite sure of the exact number when we sent the letter, but we were pretty clear in our letter that there was a max and that we were going to pay half of the match. I'm not sure if they're going to go forward with this. They might. If they don't, done. We'll be hearing from the pickleball people, though, I'm sure. If they do, I'm sure we'll still be hearing from the pickleball people because they're going to still want pickleball courts in town. So anyway, with that said, I'm just being honest. I know this group, they're very passionate about their sport. So anyway, I could have a motion to approve the ratification of the letter providing financial support for pickleball courts in Grand County.
I will move to ratify a letter of intent regarding providing financial support for the Grand County's pickleball courts.
I can second that.
All right, motion by Tawny, second by Colin. Any discussion?
I just recognize this is a great opportunity to reach out and partner with the county on something, and I think that this will benefit a lot of our city residents, usually, including your partner.
I know.
Yep, that's it.
Anybody else?
I just think that it's a great, great opportunity to partner with the county and to maximize kind of like local taxpayer funds by bringing in these matching funds or the grant funds. And yeah, this is clearly a thing that there's a significant portion of our community that is very passionate about. I still think in my almost 4 years on this council, that is the most engagement that we have received on a topic was the pickleball courts. So
Other than the property tax, it was the
That's true.
most attended meeting and the biggest controversy that we had.
Yeah.
So this will be great, I think. Anybody else? Discussion, and I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. And just so you know too, I mean, if they move forward and if we allocate the money, there'll be more, you guys will have to approve that, and we'll do an MOU, kind of like we did. I don't know if some of you might not remember the stage. We bought a stage, we split it, we have an MOU with how that's going to be managed. So that will come before you guys if we get to that point. Hopefully we will. All right. That's the end of our general business, and we'll move to city manager update.
Okay, I've just got a couple of items for you. I want to start with the sidewalk bids. We had a big sidewalk project that we put out for bid. We were hoping to have that on the agenda tonight for approval, but unfortunately we didn't have any contractors bid on that. I do want to point out that 4 contractors showed up to the pre-bid meeting. So there were contractors interested. The information got out. There were people who were considering it. So the first thing we would do in a situation like this, which is what we did, was we went back and asked them, why didn't you bid on it? And it turns out that there were just a couple of minor things, just for your information, had to do with timing, how they approached the project, either having to start and finish the entire project all in one go or do sections at a time. And then the other thing was pedestrian control. That was something that kind of scared some people off because of the ability to provide pedestrian control where we might be shutting down some parking spaces and moving people out onto a new path that would then have to be set up and meet all these different kind of standards and everything like that. So what we've decided is that we can bend on those things. We can actually assist with the pedestrian support and getting things set up the way that needs to be, and work with these contractors to make this a project that is more attractive for them to bid on. I know hopefully we'll get these 4 contractors back interested. And I talked to one other contractor today who said that he missed the bid, but he does want to take a look at it when it comes out. And we're going to make sure to get him a copy of it directly this time. So yeah, it's not great news, but you know, this happens and you just regroup and figure out why it happened and see if we can fix it. And I think we'll be able to fix it. So we will have a sidewalk project. So we'll keep moving forward with that. I was excited to hear today that the funding request for the 300 South Bridge is getting attention in DC. So that was really interesting. Not funded, just to make sure that's clear, but it is getting attention, and I think that's going really well. Really excited about that.
Well, just on that note too, sorry to interrupt. We did send another letter today that was requested from Senator Curtis' office. They wanted to know if we would share in the, where all the money was, if we would participate. So we said, yes, I'll put that on our agenda next time for your ratification.
And that, of course, was the intent the entire time,
Right.
Seeing what we can get from these different sources to limit the burden on the budget. So recent public works and utility issues have come up. There's a sinkhole on 400 East. You guys may have seen that. There's a big dirt patch on 400 East now. There was a sinkhole forming over there. Our utility crews think they've taken care of it. There was some exacerbated issues with the water lines and capped lines and things like that. So I believe they got that taken care of and getting that filled in, and we'll get that asphalted over as soon as possible. Wasn't up there today. I'm not sure. It could have even been done today. One other thing I think is really interesting, we have a lot of sidewalk issues in town because we have a lot of trees. It's just a fact that you walk around town and you see the sidewalks that are poking up. And a lot of times it's because of the tree roots. And of course, we don't want to go cut down all the trees and get rid of all the trees, but we're constantly out there chasing these sidewalks and trying to grind them down or replace them and do different things to keep the sidewalks open. But there's another thing that also causes sidewalks to have issues, and that's heat. And we've had a few situations just this last week with the high temperatures, which they get higher, I know, but we had some sidewalks that just buckled, just not even close to any trees, just buckled and came right up, which I thought was really interesting. So, we're chasing issues all over. Our team met recently. We're looking for options, ideas of how to address all these sidewalk issues that we're facing. I don't think the buckling based on heat is going to be a big issue. I just thought it was kind of interesting, and I wanted to bring up that we are definitely looking at strategies and opportunities within the community with all of these beautiful old trees that we have, where we can get sidewalks in and not have to replace them every few years because or grind them down every few years. So that's going on. The other thing with public works and utilities and parks and it was all hands on deck for this one. They've been working hard to do the annual upkeep for our stormwater systems and our flood infrastructure. So I want to just give you a couple of ideas of what they've been out doing over the last week. And this is continuing. But we did take a lot of people from a lot of different divisions and departments and put them all together to get some stuff done really quick last week. There's detention basin cleanouts. We definitely hit several of those last year. We're hitting more after the floods. We hit some before the floods last year and in between the floods last year. And some of those we've gone back to, and we're still taking a lot of silt out. And just for your information, up near the golf course, we have a big detention basin. And our staff took 40 loads of silt in a 5-yard dump truck out of that pond. And that pond was, or that detention basin was cleaned out twice last year. So just the amount of silt that comes down, we all know, you see it everywhere. But they're working hard to get those cleaned up. We're also working hard on the areas above us here to get agreements with some property owners so that we can actually get into those. Some of those basins are Civilian Conservation Corps projects, and there were no easements put in place or property ownership to get to those. So we have had some challenges on 1 or 2 of those, but those are being worked out, and we're addressing those. They're also addressing maintenance on critical storm drain channels and inlets. They've been cleaning the streets with the street sweeper, and you're going to see a lot more of that going on. Cleaning under the bridges is continuing to happen. You know, we've got so much soil and vegetation under our bridges now that it was kind of got lost that they all have cement bottoms and they all can be cleaned out. And so we're working on that, getting those things done. The next one we're looking at is 300 South Bridge, getting that cleaned out. It does have a concrete bottom. We'll be talking to UDOT. You saw the picture today. That's a much bigger issue though. So getting those things done. And this is all being done in addition to the other work that we've been doing and with the riprap and all the other projects that have been going on that we're contracting out and other things that our staff is doing every week to keep the city going. Last thing I want to bring up is that I found out today that UDOT is ready to go ahead with the bulb out project. It's a pilot project, and we're going to be looking at potentially, I just found out today, so we still need to talk to businesses and everything, but looking at beginning of August of that project starting. Hopefully. Yeah, and then we'll catch the fall tourist season, hopefully see how it works with all the people. That's it.
Thank you. Right, council reports. We'll start with you, Colin.
Okay. So on the 16th, I had in my little community, we had a meeting for the non-motorized travel management plan. And I guess it was looking at our community as a stakeholder because we do live along the Mill Creek Parkway, and just talked about all the, the benefits and challenges of being along our main pedestrian artery. And so that really kicked off our stakeholder outreach for this non-motorized travel management plan. On the 17th, I met with the mayor. And then on the 18th, I had a solid waste meeting. The really interesting thing to me that came out of that is and this has become such a huge problem nationwide, I'm sure worldwide, but there was actually a lithium battery fire in the tractor trailer full of trash that was left overnight. And fortunately, a highway patrolman was driving down 191, noticed a fire at the transfer station, called it in. The fire department was there immediately and put it out. But this is just the new reality. These lithium batteries are, the challenge of actually putting them out and just the volatility of them has really created an entirely new problem and threat in our communities.
Colin, there's that when I went to the recycling coalition meeting, it was a group of Utah recycling folks.
Okay.
We had a presentation, and I'll get you that information. There's like one place in the whole United States that does lithium battery recycling. And I'll get you that information. It was very interesting presentation that she made, but
Wow.
If that's something that we could maybe start, you guys in solid waste could start putting words out that there is a method to recycle those things.
Great. Yeah, please share that with me and I'll spread the word. So that was the 18th. On the 19th, we had our second stakeholder meeting for the non-motorized travel management plan. This was a really great one. It was the vulnerable street users. And so we had, I'm going to miss some people, but we had representatives from the Council on Aging, from the library, from the Teen Center, from the Grand Center, all talking about their respective communities and the challenges they face trying to move around this community. It was a really fascinating discussion. A lot of things came up, a lot of challenges came up, a lot of praise for some things the city has done recently, like the King Creek Boulevard. Something that really stood out to me that I had never heard before was, and maybe some of you have heard this, but the 80-80 framework, where when you're doing anything for a city, you're to consider it for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old. And so when you're putting in this pedestrian infrastructure, when you're doing crosswalks, when you're doing, whatever we're doing, these programming, if it's something that can do well and benefit an 8-year-old and do well and benefit an 80-year-old, then you're doing pretty well at sort of reaching your entire population spread. So it's just a really neat way to think of things as we move forward. In this case, we're going to be applying it to this non-motorized travel management plan. I believe that is it for me. That's it for me.
Thank you. Tawny.
Okay. It's stuck. It's not coming any closer. On the 12th, I attended a Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District. Had our normal business meeting. We had a discussion regarding some funding issues moving forward and how we are going to work through those. We also actually had guests at our meeting, and most of them live in the MAPS project, and they came to discuss future development of the MAPS property. And it was a good discussion, and was interesting to see their concerns, and we invited them back moving forward as we get further on in that process. On the 18th, I met with the mayor and Caitlin, our normal monthly meeting. On the 14th, I put on my protesting hat again and protested, but it was all very peaceful and quiet. And in fact, I believe that we were sent a letter from some visitors that attended also, and they said it was the most polite protest they'd ever been to. So, and then on the 13th, I met with the mayor and Cora Phillips and Senator Lee's staff to discuss some of the things that he's proposing, and to they mostly asked us what kind of things we could use help with, and how they could support us. All in all, I think it was a productive meeting. And later that weekend, I first want to express my condolences to Representative Portman and her family, and send good wishes to Senator Hoffman for healing. I think that incident made me feel a little vulnerable. And I think if we're all honest as elected officials, we sometimes feel vulnerable. But furthermore, what I realized is that our voices matter. People listen to us, and we can use the words that we say for good, or we can use them to inflame and upset our communities. And I don't think that that's our job as electeds, is to frighten or terrorize or get our communities more worked up than they need to be. So I would just encourage everybody, when we speak, to listen to your words and think about how they may be perceived. That's it.
Thanks, Tawny. Caitlin?
Well, I just want to thank you, Tawny, for saying that. I think that it's an important reminder that we are all humans and we're doing our best. And I appreciate your words on that. Thanks. I attended a meeting with Tawny and the mayor. I attended another EMS sustainability committee. Kind of the essence of that is kind of talking about financial sustainability for EMS, kind of recognizing that the city and the county have their own limitations on funding that they can provide, and that some of the challenges that EMS is starting to experience are problems related to billing that are much bigger than our community. So there's additional advocacy that moving forward, I think the city can support at a state level on insurance and kind of funding and regulations about EMS. But seems like there's potential conversations about looking at the healthcare sales tax for the ballot next year, and which is currently split by EMS and the Canaan's Healthcare Special Service District, and kind of what that process would look like, what the parameters of what that would look like to put it on the ballot. So more to come. I think that committee will meet over the next few months to kind of decide direction, predominantly on that sales tax. So last week I met with someone very briefly. One of the caseworkers from Congressman Kennedy's team followed up with me about talking about housing. So just kind of explained what the, history and current landscape looks like for housing in the city and in the Moab community. That it was around the time that news was breaking about Senator Lee's bill. I asked the congressman's team doesn't have a strong stance on housing, and I think it's looking to communities like Moab to inform kind of what he wants to do to support housing moving forward. So just another reminder that it's really nice to have that direct relationship and actually be heard by our representatives. And then just want to give a plug. The Moab Area Housing Task Force is doing the second annual Moab Housing Survey. You can find that at moabhousing.com. It takes only a couple minutes. It's just a bunch of check boxes, basically. Even if you've lived in your house for 50 years and it's paid off and you have no housing issues, or you are living in your vehicle, whatever your housing situation looks like, we're trying to get a better local understanding of what housing needs and desires are for this community. So that will be open until July 18th.
I did mine.
Thank you. Hi. We had a giveaway last year. Unfortunately, we don't have a giveaway this year, but please fill it out anyway.
All right, I challenge the council. Do the housing survey.
Moabhousing.com.
Yep, there you go. Is that it, Caitlin?
That's it for me. Yeah.
Luke.
So I attended a meeting with the mayor and Jason Taylor. Had a GWISA meeting last week. There weren't any really major updates. GWISA is going to be selling some of its fleet trucks, so if anybody's interested in some trucks, I think they're going to post we had some options, and I think the first one we're going with is literally just sticking them out in front of the GWISA building with some for sale signs. So if they catch your eye, reach out. They
Tell us about them.
they're relatively low mileage. I believe they have around 20,000 miles. Yeah,
They're probably Ford F-250s.
yes, they're pretty substantial trucks. They've frequented all the corners of our community, so
They know the community well.
Good sell.
and then kind of the other big thing was there's some agreement that GWISA was able to come to with a new property owner up in the LaSalle Mountains regarding some water usage to kind of make things a bit more equivalent with the valley when restrictions need to be put in place. The previous property owner was not very amenable to that. So now things are kind of standardized across the board. I attended the LHC meeting. Wasn't a huge turnout. I guess I don't draw quite as much people as Rihanna does, which is understandable. But kind of one of the big things is that the free health clinic is beginning to offer some psychiatric services, with the first clinic being scheduled for July 18th. The planning commission meeting got canceled due to a lack of quorum. Met with the mayor, Michael, and some council members to just talk to our lobbyists, which is a very enlightening conversation. And then also met earlier today with some city staff and the mayor just to discuss some budgetary things, but that's about it.
Thank you. I was at the Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District with Tawny. Don't need to go over that. She covered that well. We had a meeting with our lobbyist, Tim Stewart, on Friday. He came to town to kind of get a lay of the land. He hasn't been here for a while. And so we wanted to show him the 300 South Bridge, which he's helping us with potential federal funding for. We showed him the UMTR site. He feels the UMTR site, you know, the future of that site, and the fact that we're getting so close to closure is going to be a really big deal for Congress, for our congressmen. A lot of work, a lot of money has gone into that. And so there'll probably be some event here in December. I'll keep you posted on that as we get closer, because the last 1 million tons of tailings will be moved this year. We also had a meeting yesterday with some folks that could be our potential medical cannabis pharmacy folks. They're looking at a location here in town, wanted to get some feedback from us on, you know, what they could do, if that would work, if it fits into our zone. There is a waiver that you guys are going to have to consider. Michael is going to draw that letter of support for them to send to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. And then there'll be a waiver on the amount of footage.
Yeah, it's just a 25% reduction in the, it's not a big deal.
It's complicated.
Yeah,
It's complicated to explain, but there's a certain amount of feet they have to be away from
residential areas, and it's not how the crow flies. It's the direct access from walking. So
right. But we have to provide that waiver. It's like not much different, but it's enough that it would get them out of compliance with the code, and they need a letter from us. So that'll be on your next agenda item. And then I had a meeting with Nicole Ford. She is over the Rocky Mountaineer, now called the Canyon Spirit. They've expanded their service to Salt Lake, which is great. They currently have about 7,500 passengers per year. They want to expand that to 25,000. It was a really good discussion. Michael was in on that. We talked about the potential of having not a luxury train service coming in from Salt Lake and Denver, and not that they would be a part of that, but they totally supported that. So anyway, conversations about rail service to Moab will be ongoing, and the Canyon Spirit will be offering, you know, it's a great tourist trade for us, because these folks are low impact. They come to town, they stay in town, they spend their money in town, they buy our own souvenirs, and then they get on the train or they get on a plane and go back. So it's a great group of people that we would like to encourage to come to our community. And that's all I have, I think. Seems like I did a lot more than what I just said, but anyway, with that, we don't need to go into closed session. We always have this item just in case something came up. Nothing came up, so I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Luke.
Second.
Colin. All in favor? Aye. Adjourned. Thank you, guys. Hey, Colin.